Hey, it's Sterling K. Brown from the Hulu original series Paradise. The next chapter begins as Xavier's search for his wife takes him above ground, and what he finds will change everything. It was never just about the bunker. Tune in and discover the truth lies outside. Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming, and stream Paradise Season 2 on February 23rd on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Next up, a laughing session from The Laughing Cow. Now, unpeel a wedge of the Laughing Cow light spreadable cheese, a delicious snack with 2 grams of protein and 25 calories per wedge.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your team's home base. Collaborate within a shared PDF space. You've got your docs, your plans, your specs, and then invite the crew to build what's next. They talk up the teamwork. Here's an updated render. They think that this design could be a contender. And when somebody wonders what's the next step, AI helps you finish the rest. Bolts are tight, now your plan's refined. Run a smoother business when you're all aligned. Do that with Acrobat. Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-Acrobat.
Welcome back to DOCUFILES. I'm Paige.
And I'm Natalie.
For this episode, we are talking about Kidnapped Elizabeth Smart on Netflix. This documentary came out maybe a few weeks ago. It is very new and was an absolutely incredible, harrowing watch. Before we dive in, you know the drill. We need to tell you what to watch for next week's episode, and that is going to be There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. You can find this on HBO and we think Prime as well. So after this episode, during this coming week, you can watch that to get ready for next week's episode. All that to say, I'm really looking forward to chatting about Kidnapped Elizabeth Smart because as a millennial and somebody who was the same age as Elizabeth when all of this was going down, it brought back so many feels. And when I tell you that Elizabeth is like a longtime hero of mine, I seriously mean it.
Watching it definitely was a reminder of what it felt like to be around her age when this happened, but also watching it from a new mom's perspective was terrifying. And it actually was very difficult for me to watch. And I told my husband, I said, I need to guard my heart. It's hard to watch things like this now. I don't know if it's postpartum hormones, being a mom, but just watching her father and her family tell the story of what happened, of finding their daughter missing one night, is just, it's harrowing. It's disturbing. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It was a difficult watch for me.
I cannot tell you, since we have started a podcast that has a true crime segment, how many of my friends, as they have had children or are raising those children, have told me how much more difficult it gets to listen. And these have been hardcore listeners to true crime, whether again, it's our podcast or other podcasts and documentaries. They have a very difficult time with it, especially when it deals with children. I almost feel like this is a new trigger warning I'm realizing almost needs to come out of hey, this case involves minors. And by the way, that does mean 17 and below. And honestly, should mean 21 and below. Not that I think 21-year-olds aren't adults until they reach that age, but at 18, 19, you're still a child. It almost feels like a minor. I don't know. It just, teenagers are so young. And so to watch this happen to a 14-year-old girl in real time is just...
It's disturbing. And,
yes.
And that's really what the trigger warning is. We're going to be talking about disturbing content. And obviously, for the last 6.5 years or however long we've been doing this podcast, we've talked about the importance of survivor sharing their own story in their own words. And our intention with covering this documentary isn't to
tell her story for her.
Yeah, we're not intending to that. We're just exploring
what she has to say.
What she has to say, but like also this new documentary, how it was put together, because obviously she worked closely with the production team and the way it was told was done in a very specific way. And so I feel like that's more of the angle that we're coming from. We're not just coming on the podcast to do a retelling of what happened to her, because that's out there. And it's more like, what did this documentary do? And what did we take away from it?
And please, Elizabeth, if you do listen, or anybody on Elizabeth's team, we would love to talk with you, and our platform is yours. All that to say, seeing Elizabeth being so involved with this, I knew immediately that this would be such almost an important watch, if that's the right word. Like, I can't think of the word. I don't even know if there's one that exists, because a survivor, as you were talking about, telling their own story is the most important part of that, because there are plenty of survivors that choose not to because it doesn't work for them, and that is fine. And Elizabeth has devoted her beautiful life to helping other survivors, to telling her story in the hopes that it helps even just one person.
Well, and there's a couple of quotes online that I found about her talking about this specific thing, the act of sharing her story, why she chose to do so. And it basically, she goes into it saying that she started publicly speaking about this experience to add more context because her case had become so widely known and the court proceedings were watched by everyone. And so she was really looking at this as an opportunity to fill in more of the details and bring her voice to it rather than having different journalists rewrite what they believe happened. And there's a quote here as well that says, "As I started sharing my story, I had more and more survivors disclosing their own stories to me. And I began to realize the importance of stories." And that's what she told someone on the Skip Intro podcast. And then she continued, "This was an opportunity," this as in the documentary, "to reach out to other victims and let them know that they're not alone, that they don't have anything to be embarrassed of, that this is unfortunately such a common problem in this world, that they don't need to feel the shame and embarrassment that I know they feel, but they don't have to." And I think we've seen this sort of sentiment from a lot of the survivors we've talked to on our own podcast, where they take what happened to them and they realize that either they didn't have someone to turn to and they needed someone, or they had someone to turn to and they realized like how essential that person, the role they played, was in their healing journey. And so they became that person for someone, or, you know what I mean? So like, it seems that she also followed that course.
She wanted it to have some meaning and to serve a purpose. And in a way, what I read from that or interpret from that is empowerment. Like, hey, this person came into my house through the kitchen window one night in June of 2002, took me, had me for 9 months, and this is where these trigger warnings come into play here, okay? But sexually assaulted, raped me. She uses the word raped.
Yeah.
Repeatedly, multiple times a day sometimes, for 9 months. A lot of the time, right in her own backyard, so to speak. She was literally, I think the hike was about 3 miles.
They lived in a tent in the woods, and she lived with her kidnapper, Emmanuel, who was a street preacher and later identified as Brian David Mitchell, and then his wife or pseudo-wife, whatever she was.
Hephzibah is what she called herself back then, but that's Wanda Barzee.
And something that I had forgotten, I guess, because it has been a long time since I really looked into her case, because I was younger than her when this happened, was the fact that her sister witnessed the abduction take place.
She was in bed right there. She was right next to them.
Mary Catherine. I think she was 9 or 10, so a little bit younger, and witnessed it. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. And we do get a sense of what it was like because Mary Catherine, I believe, is the first person to speak in the documentary. And that's something that I also took note of, is we don't hear from Elizabeth in the documentary until probably the midpoint, probably halfway through.
Once she starts talking about like what they were doing after she got abducted, it was more of,
well, she could be the only person to fill in those gaps, right? But up until that point, we heard from her family, obviously with her permission. Obviously, they worked together on the project, but it was Mary Catherine, her sister, it was her father, and a couple of her uncles really spearheaded this dialogue, and they told the story.
And same back in 2002. They all came together as a family back in 2002. Her uncle Dave and her uncle Tom were right by her dad Ed's side almost immediately.
Mm-hmm. It shows what a close-knit family they had.
It does.
Obviously, she's one of 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's one of 2 girls and the 4 others are boys. But one person who was noticeably absent from the documentary was her mother. And that was something that I noticed early on into the film. And it's not acknowledged until maybe the last 5 minutes of the film, where Elizabeth does say that her mom still maintains a really close relationship with her. But this is something where she has chosen to leave this era, this moment of her life behind, and she can't revisit it often. And we also see that in a lot of survivors as well.
Yes. And Lois, Elizabeth's mom, this is her trauma too. They just have it from different angles, different experiences, and all of that throughout this same horrific situation that took place. But I heard the word survivor used again, and that absolutely Lois and Ed and Mary Catherine, her sister, they are survivors. Mary Catherine, at 9 years old, she and Elizabeth are around 5-ish
5
years apart or so. She became one of the most important people. I have chills when I'm thinking about it, because she's a baby. Like, she's 9 years old and she's the only witness. And she heard it all. She pretended to be asleep and she knew what she needed to do. Those instincts kicked in. I think a lot of that speaks to the trust that she had in Elizabeth in the situation as well, of like, okay, I'm going to stay asleep. You know, my big sister has this. So no matter what's happening, she's keeping me safe, because this is survival instinct right now. There's a strange man in our room.
Well, strange in a sense of he wasn't supposed to be there at night. Also strange in the fact that they didn't know what he was going to do. He told them, he threatened Elizabeth with a knife, I believe.
That is correct. I'm going to kill your family if you don't come with me, kind of thing.
And he basically told her to be quiet. And so Mary Catherine hears that, stays silent, and waits, I don't remember how long after.
She came into her parents' room around 3 something in the morning, and she recognized the voice that she heard pretty immediately, but couldn't place who it was. And it all makes sense when you find out how Emmanuel even knew who Elizabeth was and where to find her. After she made it to her parents' room and told them, you know, somebody took Elizabeth, they start looking around the house and they realize like their worst fears had come true, that Elizabeth was taken. And the key was the sliced screen of the kitchen window that had been left open. I believe that some potatoes had been burned that evening and the window was open, which it wasn't normally open. So how easy is it to forget a window that you don't normally open, that you had opened it? Plus, they lived in Federal Heights, which is a safe and also affluent community in Salt Lake. The Smart family was a very devout Mormon family. And with that, they did a lot of good works. And one of the things was that they often, you know, would hire people for work around the house and contractors and sometimes through the church. And all of this to say that there once was a transient man that they wanted to welcome to their home to do some work so that they could give him a little bit of money and maybe help him out or whatever. I'm not sure of the exact details of like the day they met Emmanuel, or also known as his real name, Brian Mitchell. But all that to say, he did do some work on the house, and that's how he saw Elizabeth. I mean, honestly, he may have even seen Mary Catherine, because there was also a period where he was maybe going to go back and get her or Elizabeth's cousin as well, which that plays a key role. And we'll maybe get into that. But
yeah, that was something that I hadn't remembered either. The fact that I knew that he worked on the house, and
I swear it was like the roof or something, like rain gutters, the roof. It was something like that.
something, but he never returned to collect his payment. And so they kind of wrote it off as like, oh, that was an interesting individual, but harmless because he didn't even care about the money.
Yeah.
But it turns out he was just away and plotting. But he wasn't the initial suspect either. There was another individual, Richard Reese, who initially came into police law enforcement's eye line.
And there's nothing that satisfies or hits home quite like home cooking. And HelloFresh makes it easier to do more of that this year. They have recipes that feel good and are always delicious. If you know me, you know I enjoy getting in the kitchen, but sometimes get a little bit too busy to do so. I'm sure that so many of you can relate, so I want to tell you that I have been turning to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I have turned to HelloFresh actually to help me pull my family together over meals that are simple and rewarding, again, on those busy weeknights. What's amazing is you get to choose from over 100 recipes every week that include cuisines from around the world. They even include 35 high-protein recipes each week, which includes Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options. You get to feel great with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and 100% antibiotic and hormone-free chicken. When I tell you that the HelloFresh chicken is some of my favorite chicken, the best tasting chicken I've ever eaten, I really do mean it. Don't know what it is, but there is something extra special about it to me and my family. We love it. What else is really great about HelloFresh is that their recipes are often paired with seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. Listen, like I've said, I've turned to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I stand by it because when dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. See what I'm talking about by going to HelloFresh.com/diaries10fm to get 10 free meals plus a free Zwilling knife, which is a $144.99 value on your third box. Offers valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
If you've been thinking about starting a GLP-1 weight loss journey, Ro makes it simple. With Ro, you get 100% online care, access to clinically proven FDA-approved medications, side effect management, dosing support, and more. And best of all, it's all from home. Ro also offers the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss at the lowest cost around. It uses the same weight loss ingredient as the shot with comparable results, helping patients lose an average of 14% of their body weight within a year. That's one daily pill designed to reduce cravings and help you feel fuller. The pill starts at $149 for the first dose and $299 a month for higher doses, plus the Ro Body membership. Membership is $45 for your first month and $145 monthly after, and includes unlimited provider messaging. Ro also offers brand name FDA-approved GLP-1s at the lowest cost, whether you use insurance or pay cash. Eligible patients can start treatment in as little as a week. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Go to ro.co/diaries to see if you're eligible for the new GLP-1 pill on Ro. That's ro.co/diaries to get started on Ro. Go to ro.co/safety for box warning and full safety information about GLP-1 medications.
If you care about the seafood you eat, you need to know where it comes from. Wild Alaskan Company delivers 100% wild-caught, frozen right off the boat, perfectly portioned fish straight to your door, so you always know exactly where it comes from. That means no antibiotics, GMOs, or additives. Just clean, real fish that support healthy oceans and responsible fishing communities. Get seafood you can trust. Go to wildalaskan.com/wildpod for $35 off your first box of seafood today.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
I do want to say here that Mary Catherine, at such a young age, 9 years old, was the only witness. She heard the voice telling Elizabeth to come with me or I'm going to kill your family. She probably also heard him tell her which shoes to put on because she was going to put on some, I don't know if it was slippers or something, but Elizabeth talks about this in, I believe, either the documentary or this YouTube video that I really want to tell our listeners about, where it's very new on Elizabeth's YouTube channel, where she revisits where the camp was and does the hike with her brother. Please check that out. But she mentions, I believe it's that YouTube video, that he told her no, those shoes, and points to her tennis shoes because,
well, they were going to be walking.
They were going to be walking. They were going to be hiking. That hike is not the easiest. Elizabeth is quite fit. So that girl, she just flies up there. But her sister-in-law, cutest, funniest gal ever. She's adorable. And she's on the hike with Elizabeth's brother, who she's married to. And she's kind of hurting. She does it, but she's like, wow, I can't believe you did that. And then that's kind of when I think Elizabeth eventually, during one of those kind of moments, she talks about these tennis shoes. But so Mary Catherine is hearing this voice and she actually recognizes it, but she couldn't place it. So when all of this Richard Reese stuff comes out, and law enforcement was really pushing on him, but she knew it wasn't the voice, right?
She knew. And I think that was where we first started to see law enforcement doubt her eyewitness testimony, because they said, oh, well, you're 9 years old. You might have been partially asleep. Do you really know who it was? Do you really remember what he sounded like?
Mm-hmm.
And she was pretty persistent. This is not the guy.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe her. They felt that they had the right person in custody. He was in custody for a minute. And then he actually died of a brain aneurysm or a hemorrhage or something like that. And this death in custody really had everyone start spiraling because they believed him to be responsible for abducting Elizabeth. They started to realize, well, we may never find Elizabeth because the person who knew is no longer with us.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the ironic part, though, is the reason that they got to Mr. Ricci here, or Reese, is he had done work on the house. So they were trying to find men who had done work on the house, which Brian Mitchell had done. But here's what really got Richard off of being seen as accountable, though. On top of Mary Catherine saying, look, that's not the voice. And man, does Richard have a pretty distinct voice. And I can still hear him telling law enforcement, it's not me, pal. Something like that. He was getting really heated about this, and he did have a record. But when Elizabeth's cousin's house was attempted to be broken into, it was a similar MO to how Elizabeth's house was broken into. And thank goodness they didn't get in and take Elizabeth's cousin. But it was the chairs, it was a window. I think they split the screen. And Richard was in jail at the time. So they go, well, this could be a horrible prank or copycat crime. But who is after this family? We have to take it seriously that her cousin, Elizabeth's cousin's house, was also attempted to be broken into. But Richard being in jail was like, okay, maybe he's not the guy. And then you're right, he passed away.
And then on top of that, the fact that this information hadn't been released to the public. So the public had no idea about the chair.
That's
and
right.
the cut screen. And so if this was a prank, it had to be someone very closely tied to the case, or it had to be the same perpetrator. And we do know that, at least in the documentary, Ed and his brothers do talk about what it was like when law enforcement and the community turned their eyes on them as potential suspects.
To be honest, rightfully so. It looked like it could have been an inside job. Law enforcement was really wondering that. And they were awful to Ed, if you ask me. Not law enforcement, but the court of public opinion.
They were awful to all of the family at this time. I can't imagine what that must have been like to be grieving a potential death, because what do you think is going to happen when a little girl is abducted from her bedroom? You think, rightfully so, that that's where it's leading to. But also, Ed talks about how beyond distraught he was because his daughter is missing. And he seems like such a good dad, by the way.
Oh, yes. And Mary Catherine looks just like him. So does Elizabeth, but when you look at Mary Catherine, she is all Ed, and that's so cute. But I will say they really were looking also on top of Ed and questioning his tears. They were really questioning Uncle Tom because of a horrific interview. And by horrific, I mean he hadn't slept in 5 days and he couldn't put a thought together. And plus, you're nervous on national television.
They put that footage in the documentary. And honestly, if I had seen it live, I would have thought he was drunk or lying.
Same.
Because it was very clearly a terrible interview. And he does go on to say that after the interview took place, his wife turned to him and said, "You fucked this family." And that's how mad the family was at his performance in this interview. And I feel like he helps out the family in a way that like he makes up for it, I guess, later on as he is very active in the investigation. And he is eventually the person who helps us find Emmanuel, or at least find the identity of Emmanuel. Like Emmanuel's real name, Brian Mitchell. But
well, because eventually Mary Catherine remembered.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is who it is. And it makes sense why she couldn't place it right away. He wasn't very involved in their life. He was at the house like once.
Right. And she says, "Oh, it was Emmanuel." And everyone's like, "Okay, but who is that?" And we realize, oh, right, this is a street preacher. This is someone who law enforcement is familiar with. He had a history with them. And he actually had been in police custody during Elizabeth's kidnapping at one point because he had stolen something from a store and they eventually let him go. And that was how they were able to get a current photo of him, which if anyone is familiar with this case, he was known to wear long robes. He had a long beard, long scraggly hair. He really stood out in this community.
He did. And so did Wanda, his wife, and also Elizabeth. Elizabeth even mentions like, well, yeah, we looked a little bit interesting. We have veils and all of these interesting kind of garments on that aren't traditional to this modern society in Salt Lake. And so it's one of those things of the case where they'd been so many places. I think a library, party, like, and this is 9 months. So there's more than just these. And you just go, oh my goodness, like how could nobody truly figure out it was her? But it's like her face was covered and it's under this guise of, religious sanctity that, oh, how dare you kind of question these people in veils and robes, So it was a whole side of this case that I think kind of held it back a bit.
You mentioned the party that they attended, and that's something I wanted to touch on when I was watching this.
I can barely think about it because it brings up so many emotions. I get so frustrated.
Well, it reminded me, and I know this seems like a little bit out of left field, but it reminded me of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives because there is this underground culture in Salt Lake City, in the Mormon community, where because it is such a heavily controlled religion with so many rules in place, so many expectations of how to lead one's life, there is a result, an underground community that is a little bit more wild as a result of that. So there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of drugs, there's sex parties going on. And Emmanuel eventually does take Hepzibah and Elizabeth to one of these sort of parties. And they don't go into too many details about what exactly was happening at this specific one, but they stuck out like sore thumbs because they were the only ones dressed in robes.
And veils.
And veils. The two women, or one was a girl, very clearly a girl, had their faces covered. And there are photos that were taken of them at one of these parties.
Yep.
And, I think it is part of that underground culture where it's like, yes, certain things happen here and we don't question it. And I think that's partly why they were able to get away with what they were doing there.
Let's be real and give some grace to the people who did see them. I mean, on top of this religious part of it, just like what you explained and the part that I explained, right? Those sides of this religious coin, right? Of kind of like, hey, like whatever's going on there, I'm staying out of it for a lot of different reasons. You don't think that somebody that you are at a party with, that perhaps, by the way, you have heard of before, because how are you at this party? You don't think that they have kidnapped somebody and that they have them right out in plain sight at this party. I always used to say, like, the key to being sneaky is not being sneaky at all. And I kind of stand by that. I also say the truth will always win. But at the end of the day, if somebody isn't appearing to be sneaky, you have no reason to believe that they are being sneaky. You think that they have permission to do whatever it is, because otherwise, why would they be doing it? And again, whose first thought is that? Maybe more so now today, all of these years later. We're pushing 25 years, but certainly not then. You really just didn't think about it. And this wasn't a common occurrence in Salt Lake society, which is why it was such a big case. On top of the resources that the family, thank goodness, was blessed to have, this is just not something somebody at those parties were thinking, oh, that's Elizabeth and he's got her. Like, of course not.
Well, and I think one of the things that the documentary does really well is that it challenges the whole discourse of why didn't she escape, that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And she acknowledges that people have asked her, why didn't you leave when you were at that party? Why didn't you speak up? Or she eventually comes into contact with a police officer who questions Brian Mitchell and wants to talk to Elizabeth as she's in her robes and has her face covered and wants the covering to come off her face, and acknowledges that he's looking for Elizabeth Smart. And I think the documentary did a really good job showing the power of coercion and fear and manipulation. And
yes,
that's something that we may not have been able to explore if Elizabeth hadn't had such a hand in how the documentary was put together.
Mm-hmm. She says, and I've heard her say this a few times when answering that question about why you didn't run, that she also wanted to make sure that when she did that, well, let's remember, he was keeping her alive as a wife. His intention was not to kill her. It was to instill fear and create power within that fear. He wanted to keep her as a wife. So at some point, she must have learned that, right? And she knew if she was going to make her escape, that it needed to work. And that was very difficult because he would have her connected to things at the camp that would keep her there, and all kinds of other power and control tactics.
She mentioned that he would put her on a chain and walk her like a dog.
She does say it just like that.
That's not me using my own verbiage. That is her verbiage.
She says just that. And it's true.
It's true. And it's scary to think that that was happening while people were looking for her.
She could hear them. She could hear them in those hills calling her name.
Mm-hmm. But she had to remain quiet. And it just shows that her survival depended on her compliance.
She was so smart with, the entire time, right? But two things really stick out with me. One is when Lois, participating in things like these documentaries and interviews, she mentions that Elizabeth used French in some kind of journal or diary that she had there to be able to write down how she really felt, which also gave plenty of proof that we all knew at 14 she was not there of her own will. But also when there was a moment where things felt a little too close for Brian, and he felt like people were closing in on them and they needed to kind of go disappear into a big city like New York or somewhere in California. And they did just that. They went to San Diego. And I think from San Diego, they were maybe going to go to another big city. And she thought, oh my goodness, if we leave the West, I may never be found. She was so brilliant.
She manipulated him.
I wanted to say that in a good way. Yeah, without the negative connotation to that word. Like, she was so
I didn't
smart.
mean it in a negative way, but
You
yeah,
did not
you know
at
what
all.
I mean? Like,
Yeah.
she convinces him that this is what God told me, but God would never speak to me.
We need to go back to Salt Lake.
Yeah, he would speak to you. Maybe you should pray on it. And eventually he says, yeah, that's right. She played into his desire for power and control. And that's what I meant by that. But yeah, obviously it was a survival tactic.
And after they went back, that saved her life ultimately, at least from her captors, because eventually this did lead to the policeman coming into contact with them and, saying, we're looking for Elizabeth and are you Elizabeth? And all she could muster herself to say, which is exactly what she needed to say, was thou sayest.
I think the police officer even said was like, I've never heard anyone say that in my life, but I'm going to take that as a yes. And he whisked her away. And I literally had chills at that moment in the documentary because you can tell, even though she's shared her story for years now, it's been a couple of decades, that it's hard for her because like those are scars she's always going to have. You know what I mean? And like you could feel the rawness in her telling of what happened.
What I thought was so beautiful and did find as a relief as a viewer and a supporter of Elizabeth for all of these years, like I said, we're pushing 25 years, was as soon as she got away from her captors, she said it felt like she got everything she had lost right back. And that's amazing because I think all survivors have different experiences. And even Elizabeth herself would likely say that, of course. So maybe they don't all feel like that, right? And I think a lot has to do with what's your history? How did you grow up? Who are you as a person? How are you as a person? How you process all types of different things, right? We're all different as people. So I love as a supporter of hers that she felt that relief immediately as well. And of course, she's gone through so many different things. And I mean, she's even gone through people asking her about intimacy with her husband. And she doesn't love that question. But I mean, let me tell you.
Well, who would? That's so weird. Like, and so inappropriate.
It is weird. Like, do you not need to know that that would probably be difficult? But I mean, she just handles it like a graceful champion. I just love her.
Yeah, she handles everything with grace. And I think she's such a testament to what it's like to be a survivor and turn something that's horrific into, I don't want to say lemonade, but she's turning it into something that is going to be useful for other people. And it shows she's helped redefine how we look at survivors, how we talk to survivors, how we talk about survivors.
Yes.
And she's really been at the forefront of that dialogue.
Absolutely at the forefront. I feel like something I have also interpreted from Elizabeth is that, yes, this happened to me and it was horrible and it was 9 months of my life when I was 14, turning 15. But I have so much more life than that.
Yes.
I have children. She works out like a mad woman. I mean, I need her to do like an arm routine, please. So I think it's such a great reminder of, right, how we see survivors. Like, can we see them past that story? Even the very vocal ones that share their story a lot for self-empowerment and any of the other important things that may bring for them. It's such a great reminder of like, yeah, this is Elizabeth Smart. She is not only the girl who was kidnapped for 9 months. And it's such a lovely sentiment, important sentiment that I want to try to take forward as someone who does consume these types of interviews and documentaries that are put out by the survivor for the survivor. So if you're ever questioning, because Natalie and I do talk a lot about ethics here and there when we've done interviews or guest spots on podcasts, just remember, if the survivor is involved in said documentary or the creation of whatever is expressing or telling their case and or story, then that's kind of like a good clue. And they will easily tell you when they want to leave something like that behind. Like, oh, that was actually a horrific experience. Well, then that's when we kind of stop consuming that. And I think social media helps us a lot with that now too, because they're going to promote what they want to promote about their lives if they have social medias like Elizabeth does. And a lot of them will use that as a tool.
I want to put a little asterisk there though, because we have seen and spoken to and gotten to know survivors who have participated in documentaries or even been interviewed by people like Dr. Phil. and have had experiences where they didn't have a positive experience.
That's right. So when they tell you, that's when you stop consuming that particular piece. We don't know until we know.
Right. So yeah, just because they're involved doesn't necessarily always mean, though, that it is a stamp of approval. But we can say that if they are promoting it, like Elizabeth is promoting this documentary, that it is safe bet that she stands behind the final product of it.
You can also take a look at how are they involved? Is it just an interview?
As an executive producer?
Or are they an executive producer? Exactly. So there are some telltale signs, and it's important to pay attention to those. And when in doubt, just don't watch until you hear more. You know, there's always that, or just always I don't know. I'm going to get off my soapbox. But this documentary brings about so many thoughts like that too, right? So that's where I'm just like dumping them all out here. This was an amazing watch. Elizabeth's incredible. She will continue to be one of my heroes, probably forever. Come back next week for another DOCUFILES. Again, we will be discussing There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. Before that, though, you can find us for coverage of a case that needs your attention on our true crime episodes on Thursday. And on Monday, we'll be here with Unscripted. Thanks so much for being here. Bye. There's nothing that satisfies or hits home quite like home cooking. And HelloFresh makes it easier to do more of that this year. They have recipes that feel good and are always delicious. If you know me, you know I enjoy getting in the kitchen, but sometimes get a little bit too busy to do so. I'm sure that so many of you can relate, so I want to tell you that I have been turning to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I have turned to HelloFresh actually to help me pull my family together over meals that are simple and rewarding, again, on those busy weeknights. What's amazing is you get to choose from over 100 recipes every week that include cuisines from around the world. They even include 35 high-protein recipes each week, which includes Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options. You get to feel great with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and 100% antibiotic and hormone-free chicken. When I tell you that the HelloFresh chicken is some of my favorite chicken, the best tasting chicken I've ever eaten, I really do mean it. Don't know what it is, but there is something extra special about it to me and my family. We love it. What else is really great about HelloFresh is that their recipes are often paired with seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. Listen, like I've said, I've turned to HelloFresh many times in my life now. I stand by it because when dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. See what I'm talking about by going to HelloFresh.com/diaries10fm to get 10 free meals plus a free Zwilling knife, which is a $144.99 value on your third box. Offers valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
If you've been thinking about starting a GLP-1 weight loss journey, Ro makes it simple. With Ro, you get 100% online care, access to clinically proven FDA-approved medications, side effect management, dosing support, and more. And best of all, it's all from home. Ro also offers the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss at the lowest cost around. It uses the same weight loss ingredient as the shot with comparable results, helping patients lose an average of 14% of their body weight within a year. That's one daily pill designed to reduce cravings and help you feel fuller. The pill starts at $149 for the first dose and $299 a month for higher doses, plus the Ro Body membership. Membership is $45 for your first month and $145 monthly after, and includes unlimited provider messaging. Ro also offers brand name FDA-approved GLP-1s at the lowest cost, whether you use insurance or pay cash. Eligible patients can start treatment in as little as a week. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Go to ro.co/diaries to see if you're eligible for the new GLP-1 pill on Ro. That's ro.co/diaries to get started on Ro. Go to ro.co/safety for box warning and full safety information about GLP-1 medications.